You're listening to Talking to Teens, where we speak with leading experts from a variety of disciplines about the art and science of parenting teenagers. I'm your host, Andy Earle. We're here today with Brooklyn Raney. She is the author of One Trusted Adult: How to Build Strong Connections and Healthy Boundaries with Young People. In addition to being a writer and a speaker, Brooklyn also is a teacher, and she also runs a summer camp and facilitates workshops at schools all over the country. Really excited to speak with Brooklyn today about how sometimes adults need to get out of the way and just let teenagers do their thing, and what that means and how we can actually do that. Brooklyn, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today. There are people in the world who are authors, and there are people in the world who are teachers, and there are people in the world who run summer camps, but you kind of do all of these things somehow. So can you just walk me through how all of this sort of came to be and why you're doing what you do?
Absolutely. So I completed the Ed Theater program at NYU and had an incredible professor there who definitely was a trusted adult for me and unlocked so much of my thinking and ideas around education and sort of unpacking the education I had received and spinning it and looking at it in a whole new way, and really understanding that we can't access young people until they trust us. And so much of trust comes from play and engagement and imagination and just being present. And using those tools, I then went into the boarding school world where I had come out of, and I returned to my high school to redesign, redevelop, really ignite the leadership and life skills curriculum. And using theater as a tool for that, just found so many ways to build relationships and have really difficult conversations about topics that were sometimes off the table for adults and young people to be talking about, but are probably, I would say, the most important conversations to be having.
Yeah.
A lot of those topics you discuss on your podcast, which I love, with so many experts. And from there, as you grow in your role and your position, I became an assistant dean at another school and then a dean of students, and really moved further and further away from the preventative side of education and leadership and life skills, and really on the responsive side and the reaction side, and got a little lost there. I think personally, I enjoyed the work, I wanted to do the work, but I always felt like 51% of my job was responsive instead of preventative.
Yeah.
And that was difficult for me. I think there are many wonderful people who can do that work, and it wasn't the space I could live in.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to be mentoring and I wanted to help before the crisis. And I saw the
Right.
value in the help in the crisis.
Oh,
I mean,
it's
so much
definitely
growth
needed.
happens.
No, right. Yeah, right.
So much. But I saw especially high school girls just really struggling. And so
Yeah.
I proposed the idea of working with middle schoolers. I think, one, to draw more people to our school and to learn of our high school program, but two, to sort of get them earlier, get them
Yeah.
before they're pummeled by all this. And obviously that gets earlier and earlier and earlier as the years go on. But we started something called the Girls Leadership Camp, and we had 11 girls our first year. And that professor I talked to you about from NYU, she is actually on staff and is one of the founding people with me.
Oh, how cool.
Yes, very cool. But we wanted to create a technology-free space where girls, I use a method called come on, like curriculum, what are we teaching? Model, what are we showing them about how women can get along and women work together, and just being adventurous and playful. The obstacle is always like, what challenge are we going to put in front of them that's going to test their teamwork, test their communication. So whether it's
Yeah.
building a picnic table or climbing a mountain or putting up your tent or just getting along in a dorm, how are we choosing to make it a little uncomfortable so that we can have more real conversations? And then the N is the now what. So
Uh,
you've had this experience. Where do you go from here? How do you take this back to your community, your school, your family, and do something with it? So that camp from 11 girls, every year it kind of doubled. And this would have been our 10th summer. And we have around 80 girls and a staff of 20, 25. And then we have a high school intern program now. So a lot of girls graduate from camp and they want to stick with us. So they come back and intern. And from there, really, you asked me how do I do all these things, or how did all this happen? It's because girls ask. The young people are
mm,
like, hey, you're not going to leave us in high school alone, are you? We still need you. And so we started a travel program called Girl Captain, where we go back and forth between Morocco and Peru, and we train high school girls to
wow.
facilitate workshops on courage and confidence with elementary school girls in rural villages. And I mean, that is incredible work.
Mm.
And it's when we get out of the way as the adults, train and get out of the way, then two generations of young women are growing. So it's all just born out of a need. And I have an incredible board now that oversees the whole organization called Generation Change, and that oversees each of the programs. And then I really stepped away from day-to-day education to write the book. And from writing the book came all these opportunities to speak and run professional development programs for educators around the country and around the world now.
You mentioned that a big part of your approach is kind of getting out of their way and
Mhm.
just kind of letting things happen. And one thing that I had marked in your book actually was following that same sort of theme, and it was a situation about when Yik Yak came to your school, and you had to figure out like how to deal with Yik Yak, and
Yes.
you sort of like had a similar thing happen.
Yes. Well, and that reminds me, I mean, my favorite metaphor and example, and I love to tell stories, but watching National Geographic and I think this is as much a parenting message as it is sort of the educator or the camp director message, but baby birds, like we want to, when you watch a baby bird coming out of that shell, you just want to crack it open for them. Like it looks like painful
Let
struggle,
me
right?
just
It's like,
get that
oh,
for
come
you.
on, little
Yeah,
baby,
right.
let me just like help you out. And I'm watching this National Geographic, episode, and they're talking about how, like, if the mother helps the baby bird will not build the strength in its neck to ever learn to fly. And so when we think we're helping,
Mm,
we think that we're doing something, and we're getting in there to like get all the obstacles out of the way of the child, we're really telling them that they're not capable, and we're not allowing them to sharpen their beak and practice those skills to prepare to launch, to prepare for the next phase. And there's that reason for adults to get out of the way, right? Just for the very simple, like the child needs to build the skill. But the flip side in the story you're talking about with the Yik Yak controversy really was about that the young people had the answer.
mm,
They could do something to prevent something with their peers that I couldn't do. So for people listening, and Yik Yak was this anonymous uh, social media app where you could post anything and everything, and meant to be positively used. I think our student council was using it to say, hey, there's hot dogs down at the grill, or we're having a fire later, or
mm.
a volleyball match, like a good, easy communication system, quickly in the hands of anyone, not just
Yeah.
adolescents. And it quickly
It's an
took a turn.
administrator's nightmare, though. Yeah.
It is, and I will never forget the day of sitting in the dining hall and a young person walked past me and said, "Mrs. Rainey, check your phone." And it just kept walking, like she didn't want to be seen telling the dean that something was
Mm.
going on, but she needed me to know. And so when I looked at my phone, I had 25 emails and all these messages saying like, we're having a Yik Yak outbreak. And so when I got on there, I didn't even know what this was. I had never heard of it. I downloaded it, got on there, saw it, and then my gut reaction is to message and say, hello, students. This is Mrs. Rainey. Every your
Right.
digital footprint is going to be noted, and we can see this, and we're better than this. And then the number of nasty, terrible, horrible things said back to me and to each other, and just the mocking and all of it. And so I was truly clueless, and I found our school presidents and said, "What do we do?" And they're like, "We don't know either. Let's get the student leaders together because we know they're people who really want to uphold this community and take care of this community and all the individuals." And when I got them together, I just sat in the back and I said, I have no tools. I have no, all I can hope is that I've trained you to be leaders and committed citizens over the last year. And, this is your time. And they together brainstormed the solution that they were just going to drown out the meanness and drown out the hate with a whole lot of love. And so they sat there for hours and just wrote really nice thing after really nice thing, and liked each other so that that would move up in the feed. And they actually killed something with kindness. Like they really stepped up in this huge way that I know that I never would have thought to do that ever.
Or yeah, I've been able to pull it off because then how would you
Yeah,
get
yeah,
everyone to like, okay, post nice things now, everybody, and like them now, and
exactly.
it could only come from them actually.
Okay, Mrs. Rainey.
Yeah, yeah, right, sure.
Right, right. Yeah, but that is, thanks for bringing that example up because it was a true moment of, I think, investing in young people on the front end and that preventative work I was talking about, and that coming through and being what saved us on the other side of it.
What about when you kind of miss the mark a little bit? You write about these conversations that happen that go like this. I grabbed you a turkey sandwich so you can eat on the road and we can get to ski lessons on time. I don't like turkey, but last week when I got you a turkey sandwich, you liked it. Well, I don't like turkey now. I think this is a pretty common exchange with a teenager. What is
Yeah.
going on here? Why does this happen? Are they just trying to make you mad? Did they really change their preferences within the span of 7 days? Or is there something else entirely occurring that parents need to be aware of?
Sure. I think you are referring to a mother-son moment that I share about my son. Most of what I write about, I am so far from being a parenting expert, and my son will tell you that certainly. But I really try to live in a space of assisting educators and holding up the mirror for educators and unlocking ideas for educators. But it is impossible to pull away your own parenting experience. And, we've all gotten the report cards or the comments about our child that we're like, is this about the right kid? Like, this is not the same kid that we see at home.
Yeah.
And so, where your child puts out their best or their brightest, and where your child likes to unpack and totally let loose. Like we all have the same, like we come home and we just like, ugh, I don't think that we always bring our best home because we're doing our best to hold it together and show our best sides out in the world. So there's that dynamic there. But I think generally, if we were to think about young people and preferences and personality, they're and we all are in this beautiful identity formation mode at all times. And if someone said yesterday they didn't like turkey for whatever reason, and I heard that, it's like, you know what? I don't think I really like turkey, but I had never been given permission not to like turkey because that's what my mom buys. And now I have a voice, and I'm going to say,
Mm-hmm.
you know what, mom? Don't
Actually,
really like turkey.
it's
I'm
not
gonna,
really that good. Yeah.
yeah, or I'm going to be a vegetarian now, or
I'm
I'm
gonna try
vegan, or I'm
this.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
totally. And we've got to model that. We have to show that it's like your preferences can change. People get married, people get divorced, people become vegetarians and vegans, people switch sports, people move homes. Like we as humans are constantly in flux, but as adults, we really love to put teenagers in boxes. We really love to say this one's on this path here and this one's on this path here, because then it's
Yeah.
very clear on how I serve that student, what that student needs to be pushed, that student needs to be coddled, that student needs X, Y, or Z. And especially for young people who've been in like a K through 12 in one community with one, and it's just passed on from teacher to teacher, and the parents and everybody knows everybody. There's not like a break free moment to re-identify, or to cut your hair and not have everyone ask you why, or dye your hair, or wear different style clothing.
Yeah,
It's
right.
difficult to shift and change. And so every time a new preference is made, it's like, oh, so now, you're this or you're that. And we want to
All of a
label everything. But
sudden.
so I think modeling, shifting and changing and reshaping yourself, and always open to growth and improvement, is really important for young people to see, especially seeing your fail, trying something and failing at it. That's the best thing that they could see.
I think that, a fundamental human trait is that we just don't like uncertainty, and whenever things are in a state of uncertainty, it just makes us feel like, oh, and you just want to like resolve it somehow as much as you possibly
Yes.
can. And as parents, it's
Well,
so
and
hard to
somehow
like,
someone else's uncertainty
oh, totally.
is
It's like just
someone else's uncertainty is more
seeping
painful.
out
Like if
into
my
you.
child, yes,
The aimlessness is just
absolutely.
like, ah.
Hmm.
So I really like this
Hmm.
though. You write on page 11, one simple thing that you can do is just ask, is there something you need me to do? Or do you just want me to listen?
Yes, that is key. And my good friend and colleague Shantara McBride, who runs Marvelous University and works at our Girls Leadership Camp and in all our organizations at Generation Change, she modeled this and she does this. And I've watched her do it over the years. And I think I tell the story about a father who heard our opening talk and sort of just, we always state our purpose. Why are we here? And we say that in front of the girls and the parents. And the girls then were like, let's go camp day one. And they run out onto a field and they're playing games and getting to know each other. And the parents kind of like slowly walk out of their space. A lot of mothers are like, do you have an adult version of this? Because I need this too. And there's all these like, can you help her with this? Can you do this? And I'll never forget this one father just sitting there sobbing. And Shantara approached him and he just felt like I think his single dad was just felt like he was failing her, didn't have the skills or tools that he was watching us act out in front of these girls. And he's like, how will I ever, do this for her, be there for her? I never have the answers. I want to save her. I want to put on my armor and pick her up, scoop her up and save her from every negative situation or difficult situation. And
Yeah.
Shantara looked him right in the eyes, like held his face and said, you only need to do one thing, and that is to ask your crying child or your distraught child, do you need me to do something or do you need me to just listen? Because about 90% of the time, they're just going to say, listen. Like, I don't want you to do anything. I don't want you to act. I don't even want to hear your opinion on the matter. I just want to
Mm-hmm.
drop this off in your lap and let you hold it for a little while I move on and do my thing. And that's painful. That is painful for an adult who really loves a young person to just hold the thing that's upsetting them. But then, 20 minutes later, they're jumping on a trampoline and they're going four-wheeling and they're going swimming and they're fine. And you're sitting there like worrying and wondering, how am I going to fix this,
Uh-huh.
unravel it? Well, we've got to learn to sit, just sit and just listen.
You write about an incident with your son involving a vape pen and a Harry Potter lunchbox.
Yes.
And so there's like
Oh,
this
yes.
whole story that's really interesting. And then one thing that I thought was really fascinating is that among your husband's concerns were your child's business skills. It says, so yeah, okay, you asked this kid to buy something and yeah, he put up the money in he came up with the money at the beginning and gave it to the kid for nothing, and then and then he ended up getting in trouble for it. And I thought it was a great example of how sometimes there's just like always a lesson to be learned even in a bad situation if you kind of like lean into it or just keep the right kind of like mindset about you. Actually, a lot of times in the worst situations are the best opportunities for kind of all kinds of different lessons, and to like be open to those, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we will hyper focus on the thing. Like we could have, and we did for a little while, hyper focus on the vape and fear for our son being addicted and the health ramifications and all of that. But when you pull back a little bit and see, you know what, there's a social dynamic concern at play, and there's a sort of, he's expressing his independence in the wrong,
Mm-hmm.
in a risky way right now. And then yes, my husband is a salesman and a businessman through and through, and he's just like, you never front your own money, like. And so yeah, I would hope my husband's talking about, you know, for sodas or for candy or whatever. So a friend asks you to get something, like there was a big business lesson in the middle of all of that.
Right, which is so true. And it's good to learn that now, with $60
Yeah.
at stake than have it,
Exactly.
happen later. It's like, you got to get
Yes.
something up front. The client's got to have some sort of, they got to meet you halfway. There's got to be a deposit involved. Like, we can't just be doing this whole thing, taking all the risk ourselves here or whatever. And how do you advocate for that and like set that boundary for yourself, is not
Hmm.
easy to do, especially when they've never had to do it before.
Right. And I think the whole thing of him, you know, the principal calling me and saying, like, we found your son has a vape pen and we found it in his Harry Potter lunchbox. Like, to me, that was such a moment. Like, here is the teenage brain, right? There, it's
Yeah.
encapsulated by a Harry Potter lunchbox with like contraband inside of it. And that is that they're just rubbing up against all of these youth needs of wanting to belong and wanting to feel independent and test the limits and find a boundary, but they're still, you know, sleeping with the teddy bear and want the safety and structure of a solid home life. And I think to your point of what you're saying about the important message not always being what you're emotional about in the moment. There's another story in the book about a student who was selling all kinds of contraband things and running quite a little business operation out of their dorm room,
Ah.
and you know, through a parent finding a credit card charge or something naughty that they weren't supposed to have, that landed in my office. And so when I got to the student and learned the scope of their business, it was actually quite incredible what this student was able to do as an entrepreneur on campus, although highly illegal and
Uh-huh.
against all school rules. And there was, you know, in a moment as the educator, as the trusted adult outside the parent, obviously we had to uphold rules and obviously we needed to hold the student accountable and teach a really important lesson. But there was also something to celebrate about their ingenuity and their ability to build. There's something there to build and to grow.
Yeah.
And so after, you know, while I'm holding the student accountable, and actually, you know, I walked them down to the police office to learn about the law on peddling and handling in New Hampshire and like
Mm.
where, you know, the business had met the law, and the police officer had a great conversation. And obviously what was wonderful about this is I was able to partner with the parents on the education of this child. So these were parents who were really eager and on the same page as me, like, let's take advantage of this and figure out the skill and the strength in this child
Yeah.
and just steer it in a better direction.
Well, yeah.
Right.
Wow,
So
that
the
sounds very
parents were so,
entrepreneurial. That to
yeah,
have all of
yeah,
this going, that's something that could
yes,
be channeled in a really positive direction.
right. So was there consequence? Absolutely. There were big consequences,
Yeah.
but there was also embracing the student strengths and like, hey, we could actually use someone like you on the campus activities board because you did this awesome marketing thing and you. So let's take the skill and steer it to something less risky where you're still feeling belonging and you're still feeling a sense of connection and like you have an ability to contribute with your skills, but in a safer way.
We're here with Brooklyn Raney talking about how to build strong connections and healthy boundaries with young people. And we're not done yet. Here's a look at what's coming up on the second half of the show.
When I'm saying a trusted adult is the answer to a young person having a healthy and successful life, it can't be a savior. Of course, our knee jerk reaction is like, take away the phone, take away this,
You're
take away that,
grounded.
take
You're
away
never
drum
going anywhere
lessons, you're
ever
locked
again.
down,
Yeah,
you're never,
right.
yeah,
In
exactly.
fact, you'll never
Give
see
me every book
daylight
and
again. And you're,
anything fun. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So I called this drum teacher and I said, you know, I'm going to have to pull him from drums, got in trouble. And he said, you know what? if you trust me, like, why don't we double the session this week? Because I think that, through drums, we can have a bigger conversation. And I've had my own storied past, and I think I have something to offer. And I was like, yes, I'm like in the middle of writing this book. I'm like, oh my gosh, here, like he's totally embracing this relationship and stepping up. And
Mm.
so took him to that session. He comes back from that session. We're having dinner, we're chatting about it. And my son is like, he said something like really profound to me. Like I really connected with it. And it was kind of like, is a vape going to kill me today? No, but if I make this choice to be this kid that sneaks a vape and goes to the bathroom with other kids who are vaping, and then those kids become my friends, and then it leads to something else. And I've kind of like chosen my friend group and who surrounds me, and that's like the biggest predictor of my future, is like who surrounds me. And so this one vape really represents sort of like a path to people, and those people represent my future path. And I could see like steam coming out of my husband's ears, and he like turning red, and he's like holding his fork really strongly, because he honestly had said almost verbatim the exact same thing the night before. And of course, my son was like, yeah, dad. Okay, dad. I hear you, dad. Yeah, I understand. Can I go now? Can I shower? Can I go to bed? And then, of course, when the cool drum teacher says it, he hears it and comes back and regurgitates it in this way that like he really felt connected to.
Yeah.
And so again, knee-jerk reaction is for my husband to be like angry and upset that he didn't hear it from him. But like, what was the end goal? The end goal is that he heard it. Like where he heard it is not as important as the fact that he heard it.
Want to hear the full interview? Sign up for a subscription today. You get unlimited access to all the interviews I've conducted. It's completely affordable, and your subscription helps support the work we do here at Talking to Teens. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.